History of a Teacher by Famous Fault. Chapter 6. Letter from Bill. Monday morning, a large gray owl with black spots soared over the heads of the Gryffindors as they all were whispering, arguing, and swearing over the Daily Prophet and its front-line article. The owl landed neatly before Hermione without knocking over a thing, like Pidwidgeon would have done. It held out a claw in such a dignified way that Harry started laughing. This gray owl was worse than Hedwig. Hermione carefully loosened the letter from its claw and gave it an owl treat. It hooted proudly and flew off graciously. "What a beautiful owl!" Lavender Brown exclaimed with high-pitched voice when she saw it and pointed towards it. Hermione rolled her eyes and looked for the sender. "It's from Bill." "What does he write?" Ron asked. Suddenly his concentration was all fixed upon Hermione. Harry was also listening, and Hermione started reading for them. "Dear Hermione, such a coincidence that you ask me about this now. 4 years ago, a family of tomb keepers died. They protected the secret of the nameless pharaoh and 2 specific items, a rod and a necklace. We found all this soon after they passed away. Yet, when I returned to England, we had discovered a lot more. These tomb keepers had been protecting the secret of the nameless pharaoh and those items for 5,000 years. The necklace and rod, called the Millennium Necklace and the Millennium Rod, are 2 out of 7. The remaining items were divided among the different branches of these tomb keepers. One of these items, the Millennium Puzzle, was buried in the Valleys of the Kings in the tomb of the nameless pharaoh. We know nearly nothing about him. That tomb has been discovered by humans before, yet the one who entered and left didn't share this information because the tomb was untouched by archaeologists. Yet the treasures were all still there, thus it couldn't have been grave robbers either. This is all really confusing to write this to you. We've gotten surprised time after time in our investigation. At the end, there was an empty pedestal. No puzzle. Now you must realize that these traps were nearly unavoidable or breakable for us curse breakers, and we were attacked by monsters time after time. A human shouldn't have been able to do it. We found scriptures that described so-called shadow trials. In ancient Egypt, criminals were tried by the power of the 7 millennium items that all had their individual power, but they all controlled the shadows. If a person turned out to be evil, their ka, a kind of monster that is part of a human soul, would show it, and that ka would be trapped within huge stone tablets by the shadow magic. These monsters could be controlled by the people who controlled the Millennium item. They used them to fight off enemies when needed. The wielders, 6 high priests under the pharaoh's command, used diatanks to summon several monsters from these tablets, up to 3, I believe, to fight the cause of criminals during shadow trials. This supports the theory of Professor Arthur Hawkins, who claimed that the ancient Egyptians dueled each other with beasts. He called these duels shadow games. Now we know they were actually called trials. We also found scriptures that described an ancient spell to create these items. The spell requires 7 days and 99 human sacrifices. The ritual was performed by the pharaoh's brother Akhenaten when the country was under attack. Akhenaten didn't inform the pharaoh about the required sacrifices, and when the pharaoh gave order to perform the spell, Akhenaten slaughtered the village of Kol Elna. When we found the scriptures about Kol Elna, we immediately went to check it out. The town still exists. We found, indeed, a tomb under the sand of Kol Elna. A tomb keeper named Shadi lived there, yet he was nowhere to be found. We didn't find much there at all, just another description of the spell and the items and the bloody history of Kol Elna. The task of these tomb keepers, the Ishtars, were to wait for the pharaoh who would return. The secret they were to guard was the pharaoh's memory. They possessed the key. Though great tragedy fell upon this family of tomb keepers just as the pharaoh returned, the youngest Ishtar, Merrick Ishtar, was the heir of the tomb keeper's legacy. That legacy forbade him to ever go to the surface of the earth, and it made him bitter. He was said to bear a hatred towards the pharaoh and his secrets, to which he was supposed to devote his life. Rashid Ishtar was a foundling and the oldest of the children. The father of Merrick never saw Rashid as his child and forbade him from ever becoming a tomb keeper, something Rashid desperately wanted. Instead, Rashid was tasked to protect Merrick. Rashid cared greatly for Merrick, and when he saw how much Merrick suffered from the thought of having to be trapped in the tomb for the rest of his life, Rashid went to Merrick's father and pledged him to make him the next guardian of the pharaoh's secret, so that Merrick could be free. Merrick's father refused and said that on the day of Merrick's 10th birthday, Merrick would receive the initiation. Merrick got the initiation, which meant he had to get the clue to where the pharaoh's memory could be found carved on his back. This process made the hatred within him grow. It was just waiting to explode. It was written that he actually asked Rashid who to hate for this. Ishizu Ishtar felt sorry for her younger brother and took him out to the surface of the earth, secretly, late at night. That taste of freedom became too much, and from the darkness within Merrick, a second personality was born. When Merrick's father found out that he and Ishizu had been outside, he blamed Rashid and intended to kill him. Merrick's second personality took control and claimed the Millennium Rod, then killed his father. When his sister tried to stop him, she nearly got killed too. It was Rashid who managed to suppress Merrick's dark side. Merrick didn't remember what happened, and he was visited by the priest Shadi, who said that the reason of his father's death was the Pharaoh's return. Merrick misinterpreted these words and thought the Pharaoh had killed his father. In a quest for revenge, he left the tomb and decided to make sure the Pharaoh would never regain his memories and kill him. Rashid remained loyal to him, hoping to make Merrick realize the truth before he killed the Pharaoh, and suppressing Merrick's even worse dark side, who feared Rashid. Ishizu Ishtar visited the Pharaoh who had returned, gave him the Millennium Necklace, and begged him to save her brother, which he promised he would. Merrick often tried to kill the Pharaoh through people he possessed with the Millennium Rod, but failed. When Rashid fell in battle by the hands of the god Ra, we haven't been able to figure out what gods they mean, but much of the story evolves around 3 gods that the Pharaoh has to claim in order to regain his memory. These gods were unbeatable, and Merrick possessed 2 out of the 3. Merrick's dark side took over and decided to become the true Merrick by destroying Merrick's will. It was not written how, but the Pharaoh saved Merrick from his darker as promised, and received the clue to finding his memories, in addition to the Egyptian gods. The 2 of them were said to come along quite well afterwards. That story had itself a somewhat happy ending. The Pharaoh regained his memories, and then he was supposed to move on. In the Valley of the Kings, there is a tomb that collapsed 4 years ago. It contained the so-called Millennium Stone, and a door to the afterlife. Yet that door was unwavering. No spell we tried could reach it. The Millennium Stone is a stone in which the 7 Millennium items fit. Yet the Pharaoh didn't move on, because then the stone should have been gone. Same for the door. This Pharaoh still walks among us. Now, you seem to know an awful lot about the Pharaoh and what happened 5,000 years ago. Can I ask how you found out all that? We found no information about the war you mentioned. We knew that the spirit of the young Pharaoh was sealed within the puzzle and another dark power was sealed within the ring, but not how or why. It would be really great if you could help us with the last pieces of the puzzle. Additionally, we can't find the Tablet of Lost Memories, which supposedly would give the Pharaoh entrance to his memories. Heard about it? Tell me if you do. Can we find that we're done? Then we can see what we will be taking to Gringotts. I've never heard about Zog Necrophades. Are you sure he is a vital part of the story you heard, or is he simply a way of making everything bigger than it is? This is a part of Egyptian history that is major and will make it into the Daily Prophet in time. Be careful. Many of us died while discovering all this. This secret wants to stay secret, no matter what the cost is. Don't go somewhere you can't return from. Yours sincerely, Bill Weasley. Bloody hell, Ron said when Hermione was done reading and stuffed some scrambled egg into his mouth. He swallowed and nodded. Do you really think Professor Muto has something to do with all this?
Yes, I do, Hermione said with a frown. There is no way these two have nothing to do with each other. Honestly, the Pharaoh from Professor Muto's story gave order to wipe his name from history, and the one Bill is talking about is called the Nameless Pharaoh. All I can't understand is what Professor Muto has to do with all this. He surely knew a lot.
The archaeologist's last name was Hawkins. Rebecca's last name is the same. The 2 of them could be related, Harry suggested.
In that case, we should look up if they really are related. If so, we could perhaps be able to find out something about Professor Muto's grandfather, Hermione explained. I could ask my parents. It's rare that I miss access to internet. When it comes to muggles, internet works better than the library.
What's internet? Ron asked, bewildered. Hermione and Harry exchanged a gaze. How did you explain to someone like Ron what internet was? It's like a library in a little device, but a lot easier and faster, Harry explained. You'll have access to nearly anything muggles know if you have that. Oh, Ron said, still not understanding a thing. Sounds handy. It is, Dean said as he swept it down next to Harry. Though I don't understand why you even try to make Ron understand. It's not possible. What do you mean? Ron asked fiercely as he rose to his feet and placed both hands on the table. He leaned threateningly towards Dean. Dean held up 2 hands of defense. Take it easy, mate. I wasn't trying to insult you. That's what it sounded like, Ron hissed at the other Gryffindor.
Ronald Weasley, sit down,
Hermione demanded as she pulled him back down by his ropes. Idiot! The concept of internet is nearly impossible to explain to a regular muggle who understands the concepts of electricity, wireless connection, sound waves, satellites, and so on. You don't know one of these, and thus it's impossible to explain what internet is to you. Harry nodded in agreement. Sorry, Ron, but Hermione is right. Why are you doing it anyway? Ron asked Dean, ignoring Harry and Hermione. He sounded rather grumpy. I know who Professor Muto is, their fellow classmate revealed to them. With a huge smile, he conjured a magazine from a pocket in his robes. It's all in here. Ministry seeks educational reform. Dolores Umbridge appointed first ever High Inquisitor. In a surprise move last night, the Ministry of Magic passed new legislation, giving itself an unprecedented level of control at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The minister has been growing uneasy about goings-on at Hogwarts for some time, said junior assistant to the minister, Percy Weasley. He is now responding to concerns voiced by anxious parents who feel the school may be moving in a direction they do not approve. This is not the first time in recent weeks Fudge has used new laws to effect improvements at the Wizarding School. As recently as 30 August, Educational Decree 22 was passed to ensure that in the event of the current headmaster being unable to provide a candidate for a teaching post, the ministry should select an appropriate person. That's how Dolores Umbridge came to be appointed to the teaching staff at Hogwarts, said Weasley last night. Dumbledore couldn't find anyone, so the minister put in Umbridge, and of course, she's been an immediate success, totally revolutionizing the teaching of Defense Against the Dark Arts and providing the minister with on-the-ground feedback about what's really happening at Hogwarts. It is this last function that the ministry has now formalized with the passing of Educational Decree 23, which creates the new position of Hogwarts High Inquisitor. This is an exciting new phase in the minister's plans to get to grips with what some are calling the falling standards at Hogwarts, said Weasley. The Inquisitor will have powers to inspect her fellow educators and make sure that they are coming up to scratch. Professor Umbridge has been offered this position in addition to her own teaching post, and we are delighted to say that she has accepted. The ministry's new moves have received enthusiastic support from parents of students at Hogwarts. I feel much easier in my mind now that I know that Dumbledore is being subjected to fair and objective evaluation, said Lucius Malfoy, 41, speaking from his Wiltshire mansion last night. Many of us with our children's best interests at heart have been concerned about some of Dumbledore's eccentric decisions in the last few years, and will be glad to know that the ministry is keeping an eye on the situation. Among those eccentric decisions are undoubtedly the controversial staff appointments previously described in this newspaper, which have included the hiring of werewolf Remus Lupin, half-giant Rubius Hagrid, and delusional ex-Auror Mad-Eye Moody. Rumors abound, of course, that Albus Dumbledore, once Supreme Mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards and Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot, is no longer up to the task of managing the prestigious School of Hogwarts. I think the appointment of the Inquisitor is a first step towards ensuring that Hogwarts has a headmaster in whom we can all repose confidence, said a ministry insider last night. Wizengamot elders Griselda Marchbanks and Tiberius Ogden have resigned in protest at the introduction of the post of Inquisitor to Hogwarts. Hogwarts is a school, not an outpost of Cornelius Fudge's office, said Madame Marchbanks. This is a further disgusting attempt to discredit Albus Dumbledore. For a full account of Madame Marchbanks's alleged links to subversive goblin groups, turn to page 17. Snape closed the paper and threw it, disgusted, on the table. That toad! How dare she clamp into Hogwarts, mistreating the student he was called, not blind. And now she would attempt to change the school. He glanced around at the teachers. He was sure that he himself would live up to the standards Dolores craved, but not all the others would. Madame Hooch would be fine. She was the kind of person that could handle people like Umbridge. Professor McGonagall would also be fine, as long as she could keep her temper down. It was a good thing that Minerva was such an exceptional teacher, because she would need her qualification to bypass Umbridge's dislike for her, which was great. Professor Sprout would also be fine, and so would Professor Grubbly Blank. It was a good thing Hagrid wasn't back yet. Snape didn't like the half-giant, but he was an important member of the Order, and Snape had decided to put his duty before his personal preferences, and thus was happy that Umbridge wouldn't get the opportunity to investigate Hagrid. When Snape's gaze fell upon Professor Trelawney, he sighed silently. There was no way that old fraud would pass Umbridge's investigation. Snape felt a great dislike for the divination teacher, yet he knew how he would feel if he would be kicked out of Hogwarts, and it was such a frightening thought for someone in his position that didn't wish it upon Professor Trelawney, who was much in the same boat as him. Neither of the two had a home outside Hogwarts. Professor Flitwick and Babbling would also be fine. They were both good teachers and hadn't gotten on the wrong side of Umbridge. Snape was uncertain about Professor Burbage. She didn't really live up to the school standard. And in Snape's books, those standards didn't lie very high. Sinistra and Vector would also be fine. Then his eyes fell upon Yugi, the only teacher with exception for Minerva he thought about by first name. It felt natural. Yugi had never done anything in this first school week to provoke Umbridge, yet Snape had heard her talking ill about him. Last Wednesday had not been to his advantage. Snape had tried to convince himself that he didn't care, but he had been curious. Snape had been planning just to throw his short colleague a hasty look, but he got so disturbed by the look on Yugi's face that he kept staring. Yugi was clearly oblivious to his staring and anything else, really. The look on Yugi's face was one that Snape recognized all too well. He had been bearing it often himself. It was an expression of pure agony. So that was the reason he hadn't been teaching classes on Wednesday. Snape turned away from the history of magic teacher with a mental sigh. Yeah, he had been tortured like that once. The same darkness surrounded them. Though Snape had the feeling the darkness around Yugi went deeper than his own. An unexpected and uncontrollable hatred for Lucius Malfoy arose within him for the sake of the suffering person next to him. Snape had realized it rather soon. Would the Dark Lord storm the castle and take it, Snape would be unable to kill or watch the foreigner be killed. He couldn't dislike him like he had decided to. This was probably the most innocent person that Snape had ever met, but shrouded with grief and hatred, polluting that innocence. Yet that innocence was the thing that was most clear to Snape. Snape turned his gaze towards the students and noticed that someone else was watching Professor Muto, that new Ravenclaw, Rebecca Hawkins. The rumors about her had flooded through the castle unstoppable like fine fire. Snape would have his first class with Rebecca today. He was curious about her. Late students were extremely rare, and she was the first in nearly 100 years. It was said that late students always were the most gifted. Snape was about to find out firsthand. Rebecca had a frown between her eyes and a worried expression. It wasn't surprised that she was worried about someone who she had known since she was 8, but Snape still found it weird to see a student looking up at a teacher with such an expression. He caught himself wondering what the Japanese had been like 8 years ago. "Can I borrow your paper?" Yugi asked him, taking Snape by surprise. Snape nodded and handed him the Daily Prophet. He carefully studied the young man's face as he read the article about Umbridge. His expression became angrier for every word. Then, suddenly, his expression went blank and his gaze spaced out. Snape frowned, and for a moment he was worried about the young Japanese. He sighed silently in relief when his fellow teacher regained focus in his gaze and murmured a Japanese curse under his breath. For some reason, Snape suspected that the history of magic teacher knew a lot more about the way things were than he pretended to. "You afraid something?" Ron wondered and ripped the magazine from Dean's hand. He looked at it and was just about to open it when he stopped dead. "These pictures aren't moving." "Of course they're not moving, Ron. This is a Muggle magazine." Hermione scolded and took the magazine from him. "Tell us," she then demanded from Dean. "I get this magazine once every 2 weeks, and Mum sends it to here," Dean started with a low voice. They all leaned towards each other a bit. "This one is the summer edition I got the previous summer vacation. I read about the so-called King of Games. I got interested and did some research. The King of Games is the title of the world's best duelist. They duel with cards. It's a game called Duel Monsters." He conjured another magazine from his pocket. "This summer vacation part was about the first American champion under the age of 10. The first ever American champion under the age of 10 was..." He opened the second magazine somewhere in the middle. The page had a red background and quite a lot of text. Though it only covered one page, the other page was advertisement for the game itself. The article written on the left page avoided a large picture at the left bottom of the page. The three friends gasped in disbelief. There in the corner, with a weird device around her arm, was Rebecca Hawkins! Unbelievable, Ron muttered. Hermione didn't say anything. She had already started reading. "I know," Dean said. "Quite a shock for me. This is an old picture of Rebecca, but I recognized her at once when I saw her. With that revelation, it also hit me who Professor Muto is and why his appearance filled me with unease." Dean opened the second magazine. "The current King of Games is Yugi Moto." Harry stared intensely at the article. The background was dark blue. Here the text covered 2 pages, and there were more pictures. He had the same weird device around his arm, but without a doubt, the person in the left corner was the same person who was teaching them every Monday and Thursday. On the right page, there was a smaller picture of a card that showed a man with purple robes and a smaller picture of a building that was called Kami Game Shop. Hermione snatched it, forgetting the article about Rebecca, though Dean, who had read it several times during the night, knew it by heart and could simplify it for them. Yugi became the king of games, simply falling from nowhere when he beat the creator of the game, Maximilian Pegasus, at the Duelist Kingdom tournament after beating the CEO of Kybercorp. He has been undefeated since. He has a load of impressive victories to his name. Yet all that stuff isn't important, Dean sighed. The rumors were that weird things happened during these duels. They were talking about real monsters suddenly appearing, clouds of darkness, and people always say that it is as if Yugi has 2 personalities. 4 years ago, the King of Games disappeared from the face of the earth after a trip to Egypt. A tomb collapsed. While they were in it, 9 people died, 3 survived. Among those who died were Jonochi Katsuya, a close friend of Yugi's, Mazaki Anzu, a childhood friend of Yugi's, Yugi's grandfather, Seto Kaiba, the CEO of Kaiba Seto's younger brother, was one of the 3 survivors. Otogi Ryuji, the creator of Dungeon Dice Monsters, and many others the King of Games cared a lot about. He didn't even turn up on their funerals, just vaporized. Then what's he doing here? Harry wondered. And Rebecca? No way that it's a coincidence. Of course it's no coincidence, Hermione said, and closed both magazines before handing them back to Dean. She also handed him the letter she'd received. Read this, it's from Bill. When he had read a bit, he commented, Duel Monsters is inspired from Egyptian carvings. Dean sounded a bit absent and looked up surprised when he saw that Hermione had fiercely started to scribble on a piece of parchment. What are you doing? If we want to know what's going on, we have to know such things. We can't afford forgetting them, so I'm writing them down. Tell us all you know about the game. Dean lowered the letter a bit. That's not much. I neither followed the tournaments or played. I don't know the rules. I don't think the rules matter, Harry pointed out as he looked at Hermione's piece of parchment. How long have you been taking notes? Ever since Professor Muto told me about the Pharaoh and Zork and all. I knew it would be worth it eventually, Hermione said with a small, self-satisfied smile. Dean, keep reading. It's truly interesting. It's disgusting, Dean said without taking his eyes from the letter. About those diatongs, look at the pictures of Rebecca and Professor Muto. The devices around their arms are dual discs. With those, you can summon 5 monsters, I believe. They have inbuilt projectors that conjure a holographic image of the beast you summon. It could be the modern-day version of diatongs. He took out one of the magazines and handed it to Hermione. What's a projector? Ron wondered, looking from one to the other. What's a holographic image? None of them bothered answering. It would be just as hard to explain to a muggle why pictures moved in the Daily Prophet. The diatongs were the real thing, dangerous. Those dual discs were just for fun and games, right? Hermione wondered. It is sold for fun and games, yet some people play with such intensity that the wave motions coming from the projectors actually are strong enough to knock someone over. At least, they say it's the wave motion. Somehow I doubt it. There is life in this game, and I believe Professor Muto knew that. That's the reason he always won. He was mostly known for having a great deal of respect for his opponents and his cards, especially his cards. That was the reason he was favorite on the streets during the entire Battle City tournament, in which he actually won. Dean was reading while telling, and Harry and Hermione were fascinated. Ron wasn't pleased. He found everything intriguing, but he knew he missed a lot. He didn't understand half the things they said. Projectors, wave motions, and holographic images were a foreign language to him, and he was glad his father wasn't around. This was Muggle knowledge on high level. Hey, guys, Dean said suddenly. I know what gods they mean. What? The 3 friends asked simultaneously. Slifer the Sky Dragon, the Winged Dragon Ra, and Obelisk the Tormentor. They are cards, the most powerful ones in the game. Yugi, oh help, Professor Muto won them during Battle City. There was something weird about these finals. They were broadcast live, but each time they would stop descending in the middle of the duel. In the semi-finals, Seto Kaiba was in possession of Obelisk the Tormentor, and Yugi in possession as Slifer the Sky Dragon. When these 2 gods clashed, the cameras exploded. The illumination and size of these 2 creatures were way stronger and bigger than the projector of a dual disc can handle. These cards clearly are more powerful than they should be, which is the reason they are banned from all tournaments, though I never knew they meant this much. What about Merrick? Hermione asked, taking notes at an incredible speed. I don't know, I didn't follow it that well. Though I do know that he and his siblings died when the tomb collapsed. The heads of the Golden Trio snapped up. Merrick was in the tournament? Harry asked, surprised. Well, Marek Star, Gojaku Mai, Kazuya Jonuchi, Yugimoto, Ryobakura, a guy named Namu, and Ishizu Ishtar. Those were the 8 finalists. First, Professor Muto defeated Ryobakura. Then Katsuya Jonuchi defeated someone I suppose is Namu. My Valentine lost to Marek and Kaiba won over Ishizu. After that, no one really knows but those who were aboard the aircraft. Then I guess Namu was the Pharaoh, Harry said. Who else could it have been? He put his head on the table, trying to get to grips with all the information blown his way. He would have to think it through to see things he might have missed. He was sure that there was something that didn't fit. Somehow Namu couldn't be the Pharaoh. Harry gasped, and just as soon as the answer to why it couldn't be Namu popped up in his head, it disappeared again. Hermione said. She had the same problem as Harry, and she kept looking over her notes to find what she had missed. I didn't know Professor Muto always had that weird style of his, Ron remarked, pointing at the upside-down pyramid around Professor Muto's neck on the picture. Dean muttered, thinking too deeply to pay any attention at all. I suppose... Food! Dean shouted out the insult so suddenly that nearly the entire student body turned their eyes towards him. Hermione, give me your notes! Dean demanded eagerly. She handed them to him, and he started looking through them hastily. First, he went through the notes Hermione had taken about her conversation with Professor Muto the first day. Then he went back to the notes she had just taken based on his information. Suddenly, Dean stopped dead in his tracks. This is it, he whispered. I know who the Pharaoh is. Who? The other three asked simultaneously, bowing forwards in a rather conspiracy-like way. Hermione, Professor Muto told you that the soul of the Pharaoh was locked away within a painting that shattered and became a puzzle, right? Hermione nodded. Understanding dawned upon her slowly. Well, there is no way the Pharaoh could have been Namu, because Namu was beaten in the first round. Actually, because they were playing with an ante, which means you hand your rarest card to your opponent, the only one who could have been the Pharaoh was the victorious one. That pendant around Professor Muto's neck isn't an actual pendant. It was a puzzle whose grandfather found in an ancient Egyptian tomb. But that means... Ron said, refusing to understand the facts. Yes, Ron, Dean said with a little smile of victory. The Pharaoh is here in the castle. The Pharaoh is our teacher, Yugimoto.